So this is the Ikea Bissa shoe cabinet, and it's one of the kind of ongoing products in the Ikea line. Now there's several different shoe cabinets. They vary a little bit in color. Some of these are wall mounted. This one works either wall mounted or floor mounted. Got a little bit tricky hardware in there, but it's kind of slick for what it does. Especially if you're in a place without a lot of closet space and you don't necessarily want to organize this stuff with your clothes, so it's really good to have that. And next we'll show how it went together. Okay, so forget the lighting, but we've got kind of a dark theme in the room. So this is the wood for the body of the cabinet. Over here is the hardware for the actual drawers or little swing out shoe holders. So as you're separating these out, what you're going to look for is the pieces of wood that have the two holes in a single hole, which will correspond to these brackets. We'll be showing more detail on those later. The white pieces are the inserts, which go on the inside of this thing. The inserts. There's another step where we'll detail it, but you can actually adjust the center one. Let's say if you had like really high heel shoes in there, you wanted to have them room for them, you can do that, or boots, for example. So that's how that goes. A little baggie of hardware is going to have everything you need. I went back and forth on the first one of these, and I did end up with a few extra pieces, but it's always better than being short pieces. So the other thing to look at, the top is the structural part, and we're using the relatively standard IKEA turn lock fasteners. These, of course, will go in a small hole. Dowels go in a larger hole, so you'll recognize that all the way around. But there is some other stuff which is a little different. There's these pieces, which are part of the hinging mechanism for the little swing-out shoe holder. So this, you're going to see one end of that is kind of barbed, like a little hose adapter type thing. And over here, you're going to notice the spacing is kind of close. It looks like a spot where, you know, let's say a turn lock fastener and a dowel would go in, but actually it's not. What you do is you take the barbed end of that, that's going to go in there, and then you're going to get some screws which kind of resemble each other here. But the different types of screws are used in different parts of this, so this is going to be something where we need to pay attention. One of these has a somewhat rounded head, and hopefully that shows up in the video clearly enough that you can understand what's going on. The other one has a flat head. See how that's a flat head? You might recognize these in other IKEA furniture, which is commonly the little flat ones are used on drawer rails. The threaded base on these is all very similar, so it's going to be kind of important to make sure the right screws get in the right places. So the flat ones are what go on these little pieces, which are going to be like a little pivot base for that stuff. These others are going to be used in another location. For the most part, they're used on the shoe holders, is what these rounded headed ones are used. And the other thing we got to be careful of is to make sure our turn lock locations are facing in the correct direction. But it's not as critical as you might think on most of the cabinet, because these mostly end up at the back. So whether they're upside down or right side up, it's pretty much there's only one way it's going to go. But whether this is facing forward or backward on that isn't super critical, because that's all at the back of this, and that's just so that it can attach to the wall. The lower one, it is critical. You're going to see a little dished out cutout area on the sides of these, and that little dish out cutout area is so that if you put this up against the wall, it will clear the trim. You can kind of see how we're clearing the trim there. Now the trim there is wider than what you might normally see. And here's a slick thing they've done on this piece, is by having these pre-drilled holes in the back pieces, you could run screws or bolts and attach this to a wall, even if you want, much higher up the wall, which if you've seen some of the displays in the IKEA stores, they actually get these things up off the floor by about 1.5 feet, and it set it up that way. So it's kind of interesting the way they do that. So we'll get on with the assembly. First things first, basically, we put all the hardware on one side, then put it on the other side, and very quickly get to getting the box cabinet together, which is kind of the easy part on this. So here you see the hardware layout and orientation for each side, which is kind of the main structural part of this. You'll notice where these little things go, and again, you're using the flat-headed screw. These holes are left blank for now. Now what I'm showing here is the little hardware piece that's part of the pivot mechanism for the shoe holders, but this doesn't go in yet. The point where this goes in, we can't really show it on camera because you're kind of working deep inside the part, so that's why I'm kind of showing how it will go in now. That's how that goes, and that's where the pivot piece goes. And of course we do one turn lock fastener, one dowel. Now where the facing is kind of critical on these side supports is one of these does not have the additional holes for attaching to the wall. That ends up being the front. So that being the front, we don't really want the label or the turn lock fastener showing. So just to be tidy, we'll kind of show all of these pieces facing the same way. And of course some of their little warning instructions about attaching this to the wall, because if all of these are open at one time, it can fall forward. If you attach it to the wall, it depends on how high up the wall you go, that sort of a thing. I'll just run a long drywall screw in and we'll be good to go. So that's a topper range, a basic square piece. It's where it will sit down on here. We use the turn lock fasteners to solidify that. We'll flip it over. There's little feet that come on this, which you may or may not use depending on how it's mounted to the wall. And we'll get the shoe holders together. So there's 3 different sizes of panel that's going to be used in the shoe holder door. And that's one of the things that can get goofed. Now if you look at the slots in this piece of plastic hardware, they actually are 3 different lengths. So your longest one, or your widest one, which is this one, will go here. Your narrow one, which is this one, will go here, and it's bracketed in. Your medium one goes here, and this is where you could adjust which position it's going to be in. Let's say if you were going to put wider boots in one side and flip-flops on the other or something like that. This is also where we're going to be using the round-headed screws for almost everything, except for some small wood screws, which you'll find in your hardware box, a hardware baggie, which will be going in the other side of these things. They'll be going in that side once we have several other elements of this in place. What you want to do is kind of mock this up before you put those screws in, because it's pretty easy to get some of these pieces in the wrong places, and then you could kind of goof things up a little bit. So with these pieces kind of mocked up, when you start putting the screws in the sides, they'll go flush so that this thing can move against the sides of the parts it needs to move against. Here we are set up, and again, one of the things about attaching it to the wall is that when they're both open, it can fall forward depending on the weight. So there's attachment points on those back braces that are a little tricky to reach, but you can reach them. And it's actually pretty good looking stuff on the wall, so if you want to cover up wall space, this is a pretty good way to do it, because you end up with countertop space, which isn't bad, and that's how they do it in the Ikea store in the model apartment there.